the accident of history. This is a very interesting one.
Super rare accident.
Super rare. And then, of course, the other part is that also just the other scary part of it, which if you look at the Fermi paradox is, good, we got to this point. How long has it been in humans? So humans, Homo sapien has been around for whatever, 100,000 years, 200,000 years, something like that. Our ability in that timeline to actually make an imprint on the universe, like by emitting radio waves or by modifying, nature in a significant way, has only been for about 100 of those 100,000 years. And are we? It's a good question. So, is it by definition that by the fact that when you are able to reach that level of being able to manipulate nature, and for example, discover like fission or other or burning fossil fuels and all this, is that what it says? Oh, you're doomed, because by definition, any species that gets to that point that can modify their environment like that, they'll actually push themselves past. That's one of the most depressing scenarios that I can imagine.
Yeah. Actually.
So basically, we will never line up in time, because you get this little teeny window in time of where civilization might occur, and you can never see it, because you never these sort of like scatter like fireflies around the galaxy, and you never
it builds up, and then explodes, destroys itself because of the exponential.
And when we say destroy ourselves, all we'd have to do is that we basically go, if humans are all left and we're still living on the planet, but all we have to do is go to the technology of 1800, and we're invisible in the universe again.
Yeah.
So it was when I listened to I thought I wanted to talk about this as well too, because it comes from a science point of view actually, of what it means, but also to me it's like another compelling driver of telling us it's like why we should try really hard not to screw this up. Like we're in this unique place of our ability to discover and to make it, and I just don't want to give up about thinking that we can get through.
Yeah, I tend to see that there is some kind of game theoretic force, like with mutually assured destruction, that ultimately in each human being there's a desire to survive and a willingness to cooperate, to have compassion for each other in order to survive.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, maybe not in humans, but I can imagine a nearly infinite number of species in which that overpowers any technological advancement that can destroy or rewind the species. So I think if humans fail, I hope they don't. I see a lot of evidence for them not, but it seems like somebody will survive. And there you start to ask questions about why we haven't met yet. Maybe it's just space is large.
Oh, space is, I think in logarithms, and I can't even fathom, space. This is extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
It's extraordinarily large. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many places on Earth. I just recently visited Paris for the first time.
Yeah.
And there's so many other places I haven't visited.
There's so many other places. Well, I like to, it's interesting that we have this fascination with alien life. We have what is essentially alien life on Earth already. Like you think about the organisms that develop around deep sea, like thermal vents. One of my favorite books of all time from Stephen Jay Gould. If you've never read that book, it kind of blows your mind. It's about the Cambrian explosion of life. And it's like, oh, you look at these things and it's like, are the chance of us existing as a species, like the genetic diversity was larger back then. This is about 500 million years ago or something like that. It is a mind-altering trip of thinking about our place in the universe, I have to say.
Plus the mind itself is a kind of alien with almost a mystery to ourselves. We still don't understand it. The very mechanism that helps us explore the world is still a mystery.
Yeah.
So that, like, understanding that will also unlock, quite possibly unlock our ability to understand the world, and maybe build machines that help us understand the world, build tools that help us
I mean, it already has. I mean, our ability to understand the world is ridiculous almost, actually.
and post about it on TikTok.
It's almost unbelievable, like where we've gotten all this to. Yeah.
So what advice would you give to young folks or folks of all ages who are lost in this world, looking for a way, looking for a career they can be proud of, or looking to have a life they can be proud of?
Yeah. Oh, the first thing I would say is don't give up. I get to see multiple sides of this, and there seems to be a level of despair in a young generation. It's like it's it's almost like the Monty Python skit, like I'm not dead yet, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like we're not there. We're in a place that in don't say the world's going to end in 300 days or something. It's not, okay. And when we mean by this is that we have a robust society that's figured out how to do like amazing things, and we're going to keep doing amazing things. But that shouldn't be complacency about what our future is, and the future for their children as well too. And in the end, I mean, it's a staggering legacy to think of what we've built up primarily by basically using carbon fuels. Like, people almost tend to think of this as an evil thing that we've done.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an amazing thing that we've done, but we owe it to ourselves and to this thing that we've built. I mean, talking about the end of the world is just nonsense. What it is it's the end of this kind of lifestyle and civilization at this scale, and the ability to execute on these kinds of things that we are talking about today. Like, we are extraordinarily privileged. We are in a place where it's almost unfathomable compared to most of the misery that humans have lived in for our history. So don't give up about this, okay? But also roll up your sleeves and let's get going at getting real solutions to the problems that are in front of us, which are significant. I would argue most of them are linked to what we use in energy, but it's not just that. It's around all the aspects of, like, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean to have a distributed energy source that lifts billions of people out of poverty, particularly outside of, like, the Western nations, right? That seems to me a pretty compelling, moral goal for all of us, but particularly for this upcoming, generation. And then the other part is that we've got possible solutions in front of us. Apply your talents in a way that you're passionate about and is going to make a difference.
And that's only possible with optimism, hope, and hard work.
Yeah.
What easy question? Certainly easier than nuclear fusion. What's the meaning of life? Why are we here?
42.
Is it 42?
No.
We already discussed about the beauty of physics, that there's almost a desire to ask a why question about why the parameters have these values.
Yeah. It's very tempting. Yeah. It's an interesting hole to go down as a scientist, because we're a part of what people who aren't scientists have a hard time understanding what scientists do to themselves. And a great scientist does a very non-intuitive or non-human thing. What we do is we train ourselves to doubt ourselves like hell. Like, that's a great scientist. We doubt everything we see. We doubt everything that we think, because we basically try to turn off the belief valve, right? That humans just naturally have. So when it comes to these things, like, I can make my own comments to this. It's like, personally, you see these things about the ratios of life, and I made a comment where I said, well, some part of my brain that just goes, yeah, well, yeah, because we're the only interesting, multiverse, because by definition it has to look like this,
Yeah.
But I have to say, there's other times I can say in the history of what has happened over the last 10 years, there have been some pretty weird coincidences, that, like, you look at it and just go, was that really a coincidence? Is something, like, pushing us towards these things?
Yeah.
And it's a human instinct, because, since the beginnings of humanity, we've always assigned, human motivation and needs to these somewhat, empirical observations.
And in some sense, the stories, before we understand the real explanations, the stories, the myths, serve as a good approximation for the thing that we're yet to understand.
Absolutely.
And in that sense, you said the antithesis to sort of scientific doubt is having a faith in these stories. They're almost silly when looked at from a scientific perspective, but just even the feelings of, it seems that love is a fundamental fabric of human condition.
Yeah.
And what the hell is that?
Well, actually,
why
I
are
mean,
we so connected to each
again,
other?
as a physicist, I go, it's This is a repeatable thing
Yes.
that's due to a set of synapses that
Yeah.
fire in a particular pattern and all this.
Yes.
That's kind of like, okay, man, what a drag that is, right? To think of it this way.
And you can have an evolutionary biology explanation, but there's still a magic to it.
I mean, I see scientists, some of my colleagues, do this as well too. Like, what is spirituality compared to science and so forth? My own feeling in this is that, as a scientist, because I've had the pleasure of being able to like both understand what my predecessors did, but I also had the privilege of being able to discover things, right, as a scientist. And I see that, and in just the range of our conversations, like that is in a weird way, it's the awe that comes from looking at that. That is, if you're not in awe of the universe and nature, you haven't been paying attention. I mean, my own personal feeling is that I feel if I go snorkeling on a coral reef, I feel more awe than I could ever feel like in a church.
You kind of notice some kind of magic there.
There's something about the way the whole darn thing holds together that just sort of escapes your imagination. And that's, to me, this thing of, and then we have different words, we call them holistic or spiritual, the way that it all hangs together. In fact, one of the interesting, you asked about like what I think about, one of the craziest things that I think that how does it hold together is like our society.
Mm-hmm.
Like what?
Yeah.
Like because there's no way, like you just think of the United States, there's 330 million people kind of working like this engine about going towards making all these things happen. But there's like no one in charge of this, really.
Not
right?
really, yeah.
How the heck does this happen?
Yeah.
It's kind of like so these things, these are the kinds of things mathematically and organization wise that I think of, just because they're awe inspiring. Right?
And there's different ideas that we come up together and we share them, and then there's teams of people that share different ideas, and those ideas compete. Like the ideas themselves are these kinds of different organisms, and ultimately somehow we build bridges and nuclear reactors
and do those things. Well, I have to give a shout out to my daughter, by the way, who's interested. Yeah. She's an applied math major, and she's amazing at math. And over the break, she was showing me she's doing research, and it's basically about how ideas and ethos are transmitted within a society.
Nice.
So she's building an applied math model that is explaining, like, she was showing me in this simulation. She goes, "Oh, look at this," and I said, "Oh, that's like how political parties like evolve, right?"
Yeah.
And even though it was a rather quote unquote simple mathematical model, it wasn't really. And it's like, oh wow.
Well, maybe she has a chance to derive mathematically the answer to what's the meaning of life.
There we go.
And maybe it is indeed 42. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for just creating tools, creating systems, exploring this idea that's one of the most amazing, magical ideas in all of human endeavor, which is nuclear fusion. Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting.
It's almost like one of my lifelong goals is like to make it. It's like it's not magic. It's like it's boring as all heck. And this means we're using it everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the magic is then built on top of it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for everything you do. Thank you for talking to me. It's a huge honor. This was a fascinating and amazing conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Dennis Whyte. To support this podcast, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, let me leave you with some words from Albert Einstein. There are two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything's a miracle. Thank you for listening. I hope to see you next time.